Hello everyone, my name is Sihem Bensalah and I'm a PhD student at Yonsei University. In this video, I'm going to present you a research project on fermentation, a process that is discussed in two recent Korean American memoirs, Crying in H. Mart by Michelle Zauner and Taste Like Water by Grace Cho. In this presentation, essentially, I'm going to focus on how this traditional and even ethnic food process that transcends both taste and temporality offers a novel framework to study grief, and more essentially, diasporic grief. So I've titled my paper, Ingesting Unpasteurized Memories, Digesting Fermented Words toward a Microbiopolitics of the Racialized Body in Zauner, Crying in H. Mart, and Cho's Taste Like Water. Every dish I cooked exhumed a memory, says Michelle Zauner in her memoir Crying in H. Mart. As she grapples with the loss of her mother, she tries to recreate the dishes her mother used to prepare, deciding that, as she can no longer be with her, she will become her. Grace Cho echoes this sentiment in her memoir Taste Like Water, as she tries to, I quote, write her mother back into existence, stressing that food was always in the foreground of her mother's memories, whether as a source of pleasure, a source of income, or something more basic, a means of survival. Both Crying in H. Mart and Taste Like Water explore the author's relationships with their mothers through the lens of culinary tradition, cooking, and eating. Crying in H. Mart, authored by Korean-American singer and songwriter Michelle Zauner, is an emotional memoir that intricately weaves together the themes of food, family, identity, and grief. The narrative centers on Zauner's profound journey through the loss of her mother, Chongmi, to cancer, and examines the deep and lasting impact this loss has on her sense of self. Taste Like Water, by the scholar and sociologist Grace M. Cho, is a compelling memoir that intricately examines the intersections of mental illness, trauma, and cultural identity. Through a profound exploration of her family history and her relationship with her mother, Kunja, Cho reflects on her mother's life and struggles with schizophrenia. This memoir serves as a deep meditation on the profound impact of war, migration, and the cultural displacement on mental health. While Zauner writes to reconstruct her family narrative, her personal story, and reclaim her Korean identity, Cho's memoir takes on the task of reconstructing broader history. In Taste Like Water, Cho aims to create a textual archive for Korean military brides by resurrecting her mother's story and critiquing the U.S. assimilation model that demands the invisibility of Asian women. Thus, while Zauner's works focuses on personal loss at an intimate microcosmic level and Cho's on collective loss at a broader macrocosmic level, together they provide a panoramic view on processing grief, loss, and suffering. In these memoirs, food operates as a multisensory agent and conative actant that works both within and alongside the body, not merely shaping corporeality, but also actively influencing its affective states. Within the pasteurized context of the US, where safety, hygiene, and the pursuit of life extension through microbial eradication prevail, Cho and Zauner introduce fermentation as a racialized food process that sublimates and preserves taste. This process, defined by the jouissance of consuming substances deemed unpalatable for mainstream US standards, serves as a marker of their Korean-American identity. From a new materialist perspective, the transient materiality of fermented foods, altered by the metabolic process that transforms decay and decomposition into flavor while converting harmful microbes into beneficial ones, invites a microbiopolitical reading of racialized bodies, echoing a pasteurization of foreignness in the name of assimilation. Thus, in this presentation, I'm going to focus on how this fermentation, with its rhizomatic assemblage of substances that transcend both taste and temporality, offer a novel framework for understanding the body as a vessel of ingested memories and facilitate the transcendence of grief by sublimating the object of loss and overcoming its inherent mortality. Additionally, I'm going to wonder how does this process challenge the notion of a pasteurized racial body, one that aims to eliminate perceived pathogenic foreignness while potentially undermining its core essence in the name of assimilation. To address this question, I'm going to focus first on ingesting unpasteurized memories, cultivating the ferments of the past, and archiving tastes. Within the family unit, Kunja, Cho's mother, and Chongmi, Zaona's mother, two Korean mothers who migrated to the US after getting married, serve as the primary connection for their daughters to access their Korean heritage. This cultural role is particularly significant for, I quote, immigrant and minority women who are designated as the guardians of ethnic identity for the family, maintaining and transmitting homeland culture. Indeed, after their displacement from Korea to the US, they both become the embodiments of their home country and the providers of a fermented taste of home. While the Western model of food preservation is predominantly characterized by pasteurization, these memoirs resist this paradigm by preserving fermentation as a means to process and archive the taste of homeliness. Pasteurization's role in standardizing food production by removing variability serves as a metaphor for how cultural norms in the US often aim to sanitize and normalize experiences, favoring uniformity over diversity. Additionally, pasteurization symbolizes a broader trend of controlling natural processes, representing the US reliance on technology, regulation, and consumerism to manage and extend the lifespan of its social and economic systems. Its pasteurized nature also catalyzes resistance to fermentation, highlighting an underlying tension between regulation and traditional and racialized practices. In both memoirs, fermentation, particularly through kimchi, emerges as a central motif. Crying in Age Mart features a chapter titled Kimchi Fridge, while Taste Like War includes a chapter called Kimchi Blues. The fermentation process converts sugars into acid, such as lactic acid or alcohol, thereby altering the temporality of the food and creating an environment that inhibits the growth of harmful bacteria and molds. Fermentation thus not only preserves nutrients, but also breaks them down into more digestible forms, enhancing both the flavor and the health benefits of the food. In Crying in Age Mart, Zauna first perceives the fermentation process as a controlled death. Then she nuances her idea as she notes, left alone, a head of cabbage molds and decomposes, becoming rotten and inedible. However, when brined and stored, the course of its decay is altered. Sugars break down to produce lactic acid, which protects it from spoiling. Carbon dioxide is released, and the brine acidifies. It ages, undergoing change in color, texture, and flavor, becoming tartar and more pungent. It exists in time and undergoes transformation. Thus, it is not quite controlled death, as it enjoys a new life altogether. In this context, kimchi emerges as a dynamic and fluid entity, a multisensory and rhizomatic substance that is both metatextural and metatextual. Thus, the fermentation process not only develops new flavors and preserves nutrients through the transformation of microbial texture, but also serves as a metaphor for the act of writing. Just as kimchi undergoes transformation through fermentation, the act of writing functions as a mean of brining memories, particularly those of Zauna's mother, preserving them from decay, forgetting, and allowing them to undergo transformation through storytelling. In this sense, the memoir acts as a space for archiving where memories are preserved and reinterpreted. Much like how kimchi acquires new life and character through fermentation, Zauna's memory gained new meaning through the process of writing and reflection. Zauna's mother metaphorically linked fermentation with archiving by using her kimchi fridge to store cherished memories. Zauna reflects on this and on this connection, noting, I quote, "In the vessel that had housed all the banchan and fermented paste my mother stored and cherished were hundreds of old family photographs. The kimchi fridge, an object transcending the American context, serves as a liminal space that bridges past and present, here and there. It functions as a repository of memories, preserving and transforming them into new temporal flavors. This process materializes feelings and archives the past in a liminal space where memories are neither entirely relinquished nor pathologically clung to, but are transformed and integrated into the present. This archiving aspect of fermentation is also present in Taste Like War, where Kunja facilitates the transition of Korean adoptees to their new country by providing them with a jar of kimchi upon arrival. This gesture not only reinforces social bonds, but also offers the children with a taste of home amidst their displacement, a comfort she herself lacked when she first arrived in the US. Thus, Kunja inverts the conventional dichotomy, suggesting that pasteurization symbolizes life and sanitization, whereas fermentation represents decay and the proliferation of germs. Indeed, during the war, when Kunja was isolated and impoverished, she vividly recalls her mother burying jars of kimchi. This preserved sustenance became essential for her survival, embodying life and resilience. In contrast, powdered milk, a pasteurized product from the US, became a symbol of trauma and death. Even after she immigrated to the US, Kunja refused to consume powdered milk because, I quote, "it tastes like war," representing a painful reminder of her past suffering. Cho not only connects her mother's eating disorder and schizophrenia to her experiences during the war and the subsequent US occupation, but also links her aunt's cancer to the sanitary and health condition faced by Koreans at that time. She draws on accounts from her research, which described Koreans surviving by scavenging discarded food from American military base. This connection prompts a reflection on the potential correlation between her aunt's impoverished diet and the development of her illness. Cho highlights the severity of stomach cancer during this period, emphasizing that people lived with the constant threat of dying from a bomb, a bullet, or a stomach cancer. In this context, pasteurized food, symbolically associated with the US, represents an instrument of death, whereas fermented food, such as the kimchi buried by Kunja's mother and later unearthed from her homeland, symbolizes life. Thus, ingesting food is not merely about satisfying hunger. It involves incorporating an object along with its history into one's present corporeality. For both authors, fermentation becomes the representation of a pulsion of life and a metaphor for processing loss and sublimating diasporic grief. That is why, in our second part, we are going to focus on this fermentation of feelings that triggers a sublimation of diasporic grief. Following their displacement, both Chongmi and Kunja developed an intense craving for Korean food, becoming fixated on it as a means of reclaiming a sense of home. As Kunja reflects, I quote, "Food, Korean food. I think about it. I dream about it. In my dreams, there is no Korean food, or I'm eating Korean food, or Korean food appears. This is what I dream about. When I first came, it was terrible. I wanted so badly to eat Korean food. It was terrible. Oh, I suffered very, very much." In this context, Korean food, and by extension the taste of home, becomes the lost object and thrusts both Chongmi and Kunja into a state of melancholia, manifesting in disordered relationship with food, either through obsessive consumption or extreme deprivation, self-deprivation. However, the symptoms vary because their respective relationship to the lost object are fundamentally different. In Zauner's narrative, Chongmi's longing is tied to a clear distinction between homeland and hostland, a homeland she keeps visiting regularly, visiting family and reenacting the memories of her childhood with her daughter. However, for Kunja, this boundary becomes blurred. Her sense of home is elusive, having already been disrupted by the Japanese colonization and by the US occupation. For Kunja, there is no nostalgic homeland to return to, because what was once home became a site of trauma under Japanese rule, where people disappeared, died without recognition, and were reduced to mere bodies in a state of bare life. In this space, even speaking the mother tongue was punishable by the violent act of tongue cutting. Home, for Kunja, has been a lost object for so long that it no longer refers to a relatable memory. Koreanness itself was already fractured before displacement. As Candice Cho observes, it also connotes the history of Japanese colonization on space and subjectivity that decisively transformed the meaning of Koreanness, ineradicably complicating what it means to be 1% Korean, 100% Korean, a condition already made impossible by the complex histories underwriting the emergence of Korea as a modern nation-state. And it is an expression of a desire to quantify identity, to make it knowable in some tangible way. For Kunja, this loss of home and identity precedes displacement, adding a further layer of complexity to her relationship with food and her cultural heritage. Kunja internalizes this accumulation of loss, sharing only fragmented pieces of her life before displacement with her daughter. In doing so, Kunja herself becomes the lost object, not only for her daughter, who struggles to access stories about her past after Kunja's death, but also for American society, which fails to recognize her past. While Chongmi becomes fixated on ingesting Korean food, particularly porridge, Kunja rejects all food except instant ramyeon and fruit cocktails, a choice that symbolically reflects her withdrawal from life. By clinging on these artificially flavored nutritional void products, she appears to grasp at faint, processed memories of her past. In consuming these artificial remnants of her former life, Kunja seems to allow her body to wither, while mind lingers on a distorted imitation of home. This degradation of both nutrition and authenticity mirrors Kunja's psychological state. While she remembers her former life in Korea, in nature, and in the wilderness, that past has been pasteurized, diluted, and rendered unhealthy through her time in the US. Thus, for Kunja, her identity begins to disintegrate as she becomes trapped in a state of melancholia, unable to reach the closure that mourning offers. Rather than entirely letting go or remaining fixated on the past, fermentation allows memories, emotions, and influences from the past to transform and contribute to both personal and collective growth. Just as kimchi jars are buried in the earth to maintain the ideal condition for fermentation, memories can be metaphorically buried within ourselves, allowing their rhizomatic influence to shape our present in a more dynamic and sustaining way. As Zauner grapples with her mother's death, the process of making kimchi emerges as a crucial ritual that helps her transition from a state of melancholia to one of acceptance and self-affirmation. Initially, Zauna felt trapped in her grief, believing that if she could not literally feed her mother back to life, she might become her. However, through the act of preparing kimchi, Zauna shifts her focus from obsessively embodying her mother to preserving her heritage while reclaiming her own identity. The process of making kimchi involves more than merely combining ingredients. It requires cutting, mincing, blending, seasoning, and chopping until the smell and taste become palatable. This labor is physically demanding. I quote, "The apartment was hot and all the windows were open. I was sweating and stripped down to my sport bra." Yet, it fosters a profound connection between the subject and the object. The kimchi making process, while exhausting, becomes soothing and rewarding. I quote, "The whole process took a little over 3 hours, but the labor was soothing and simpler than I thought it would be. After 2 weeks of fermentation, it was perfect, the ideal complement to every meal and a daily reminder of my competence and hard work." Eating the kimchi thus transcends the act of consumption. It involves digesting the effort, the dedication, and the legacy embedded in the food. signifying a reconciliation with her past and a celebration of her personal growth. The act of writing becomes particularly intriguing in the context of coping with death, especially when considered alongside the concept of fermentation. Both Cho and Zauner turn to memoirs as a means to processing their grief, focusing on the micro level of personal experience to achieve a broader collective understanding. Faced with the challenge of dealing with their mother's illnesses, both Cho and Zauner initially sought to nourish their mother back to health. However, after their mother's death, they both turn away from physical sustenance and instead embrace the written word. Cho expresses this sentiment in her prologue, saying, "I want to take the fragments of my mother and weave them into a story about her survival. I want to write her back into existence, to let her legacy live on the page, and, in doing so, trace my own." The act of writing thus serves as a metaphorical fermentation process, sublimating decay and imbuing it with a new significance. Both writing and fermentation are atemporal and liminal process that reshape and preserve experiences and emotion. By transforming their mother's corporeal mortality into enduring memoirs, Cho and Zauner pay tribute to their legacies. Their writing is nourished by their mother's memories, even in their absence, creating a new presence in their lives. I quote, "Their very absence gives them a new presence in our lives." While biopolitics pertain to the governance of human life through the lens of biosciences, microbiopolitics involves the governance of microbial life through microbiology. The focus on microbial life, however, paradoxically shifts the discourse to the population level, as the proliferating and self-replicating microbial world symbolically challenges the individual and evokes the figurative threat of the collective. By preparing fermented foods such as kimchi, these mothers not only preserve their cultural identity, but also engage in a form of microbiopolitics. These microbial processes inherent in fermentation reflect their own struggles with survival, assimilation, and cultural transmission. This process, while it entails the controlled interaction of living microbes, symbolizes the mother's effort to uphold their heritage while adapting to a new environment. It underscores the interconnectedness of the body, culture, and food, suggesting that feeding their children Korean food transcends mere nourishment. It becomes a form of cultural resistance, survival, and identity preservation. This approach aligns with how their cooking practices transcend individual identity by engaging with the collective and transformative nature of microbial life, thereby blurring the boundaries between their displaced bodies and their daughters' Americanized identities. Just as fermentation converts raw, inedible ingredients into nourishing food through microbial processes, it symbolizes how individuals and culture metabolize grief, making it part of an ongoing evolution. Memoirs, such as Taste Like War, reflect this process by giving voice to marginalized experiences, such as those of Korean military brides, and transforming them into narrative that reclaim identity and cultural heritage. These personal stories act as agents of transformation, akin to fermentation, by integrating past traumas and cultural losses into a broader collective process of healing and resilience. In this way, memoirs and fermentation converge to illustrate how grief can be processed, preserved, and redefined, offering a profound lens on the interconnectedness of identity, cultural practices, and emotional resilience. That was my first draft for this research on fermentation. Thank you for listening.